Okay. Bob Z. Remember Bob Z? Well, I think that he's now calling himself Bob Zark.
I haven't heard from him in a dog's age.
Well, I think it's the same guy.
How many Bob Z's can there be?
Because it says somewhere in all this material, it says make out checks to Bob Z. But the material is all signed Bob Zark. He's got a book out called Over the Interstate Lines of the Mind, published by The Panic Button Priest. And he's got a CD to go with it with the same title by Zark and Sepulveda. And I think it comes from the same place. Yeah. So if you, it's impossible for me to. I should just say that Bob Z is a punk poet who was in New York some years ago and carried out a very amusing campaign against the garbage department, who were prosecuting him. In fact, some people think they actually founded this special squad of people just to get Bob Z, who was one of the most prolific posterists in New York. And he sort of won that case, but it burned him out a little bit, and he left New York, and we hadn't heard from him for some time. It says here, at the brink of madness, he wandered the West Coast for 3 years. So maybe I guess that's where he's been at the brink of madness, and now he's back. Bob Z has been up to. Then we have the newest, most comprehensive and updated book on the conspiracy theory of history. It's history of the war between English and French Freemasonry. But before you get too excited, I would say it's completely off the wall. Nevertheless, it's sort of an interesting idea that English Freemasonry represents the right wing and French Freemasonry represents the left wing, and they've been struggling for control of history since, 1717. So, but it really looks kind of illiterate and crazy at the same time. So be warned. It's also very expensive, this material. So what you might want to do is just ask the guy for a free sample or the same material that I've got, the news release. You can do it by, well, I've got two different addresses here. They're both in Tyler, Texas. No, they both have the same box number, so that's okay. JKI Publishing, Box 131480, Tyler, Texas, Tyler, Texas, that's TX 75713. This material is by somebody named John Kriegel, and if it wasn't so extreme, I would actually find it a kind of interesting theory. But it ties up with the mark of the beast and the IMF and the Bilderbergers and the Birch Society and the communists and the you name it, everything. It all ties together. The best prophetic history book you'll ever read, it says here. It covers all conspiracy theories in only 3 volumes. So that's anyway, in case you're...
Actually, could I borrow that?
Sure, yeah.
I've got a friend who would be quite interested
take
in
it.
this.
It's yours.
I always take these conspiracy theories of history with a grain of salt myself, despite the fact that they are sometimes quite fascinating.
Of course.
But especially the ones which...
You can't ignore them, but you can't allow yourself to become, overwhelmed by
the ones which tend to emphasize either the Masons or the Illuminati, I'm always particularly skeptical of.
Yeah.
And frequently Masons and Illuminati tend to be a code word for them evil Jews.
Well, yes. Well, it's interesting.
As the British are for LaRouche.
Yeah.
The British are his code word for the Jews.
Yeah. Well, I think that it goes, in fact, it's even more, with LaRouche, it's even more complicated than that. But I've been studying recently a subject which impinges on this question of the origin of this idea about the Freemasons and the Illuminati. And it all seems to trace back to a few very unhinged writers around in the 1790s, including this guy, Abbé Baruel from France, and a guy named Robison who wrote in Scotland at about the same time. And nobody can quite tell whether one of them influenced the other or not. But the upshot of it is that they somehow or another they concocted this idea that the assassins influenced the Templars then become the Freemasons, and because they want revenge on the Catholic Church, therefore they launched the French Revolution. And then you get the great scene with the anonymous person who, when the king is guillotined, he leaps up on the platform and dips a handkerchief in the blood and waves it and says, "Jacques de Molay, thus thou art avenged." You know, Jacques de Molay having been the Grand Master of the Templars, who was iced by the French king in 1307 or something. So, but this is all from this one guy, Abbé Baruel, who was either something, despite his poor scholarship, I guess was something of a genius just to be able to dream this up, or else it was more likely, in my opinion, it was some kind of scuttlebutt that was going around fringe Masonic circles that he picked up on.
Now, he wrote when?
He wrote around in the 1790s or around 1800,
so
just
he was
post-revolution.
Yeah.
Yeah. These people were writing right away. They were kind of hack journalist types.
Writing in France?
He wrote in France, Robeson wrote in English, and then it filtered over to America around about 1800 and caused an Illuminati scare in America around 1800, which is
really?
Yeah, a very interesting little buried piece of American history. A lot of squawking about the Illuminati for about a year, 2 years.
No kidding.
In all the press and the right wing getting all upset and trying to maintain that the Jeffersonians were basically, these Illuminati were basically Jeffersonians.
My, where did you pick this up?
Well, there's a book called The History of, it's called something like The History of the Illuminati Episode or something. I'll get the reference for you. I don't have the whole book. I got some Xeroxes of it from a friend of mine who knows I'm interested in this stuff. Well, I'm interested in it because one of the groups of American Illuminati, so-called, were the Druids of Newburgh, New York, who I have become very interested in. And Elihu Palmer, the blind, free-thinking, ranting atheist who lived right here in New York City and ran a free-thinking club that was the sort of bohemian anarcho-crazies of the time. And they used to hang out at a coffee shop called the Druid's Head, somewhere downtown here in New York. And then they had a branch in Newburgh, New York, of all places. So, and they were also denounced in the New York press as Illuminati at one point, in the midst of a very complicated political wheeling and dealing that was basically Federalists trying to dump Jeffersonians. That's what it all boiled down to. So, interesting stuff anyway. Some interesting zines this time, including a new one, new to me, and in fact it's only issue number 2 of the New Country Report. These are these wacky libertarians who are trying to start a new country. But this time, this publication is not devoted to just one of them. It's trying to cover the whole movement. So therefore, the New Country Report. And several different groups are reporting in on their projects. Seems like most of the action now is for floating platforms in the ocean, since most of these folks have come to the realization that no existing nation state is going to sell them sovereignty.
I recently saw some very interesting propaganda from an extremely sort of corporate-oriented floating independent nation state.
The one off that they want to do it off Panama. I think it's the Atlantis project.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah,
they're reported in here.
I'll bet they are. They want it to be this sort of.
It's free trade zones is what they're interested in, but with no drug or gun laws.
Right, and absolutely no oversight at all.
Yeah, sure.
Basically, massive money laundering center.
Yeah. Nevertheless, it's one of the. I've always liked micropetrology ever since I was a kid. I've harbored fantasies of my own along these lines, but at least I know they're fantasies. Anyway, it's a amusing little zine, and you could keep up with. There's an interview with an engineer who designs sea platforms. It's very technical stuff, good stuff. Anyway, it's New Country Report. Box 7603, New York, 10150-7603. That's New Country Report, Box 7603, New York, 10150-7603. All these folks are also up on the net, you know. It's they're very, very hipped up on the internet, all these people. So if you get the zine, or even just give them a call. Is there a telephone number? I don't see one. There might be one under this. Never mind, I can't get that off. Well, you get in touch with them and ask them how to find them on the internet. It's covered up by the stamp here, so I can't tell you. And I think you'll be amused. There's a book from Loom Panics called How to Start Your Own Country by Erwin Strauss. If you haven't seen that book, all this stuff will be a little bit opaque to you. So I recommend that too. You might find it even at Tower Books in their weird stuff shelf. And you should read that to get a sort of historical background of the micropatrological movement. Basically, Strauss said it years ago. He said, if you don't have your own atomic bomb, forget it. You know, so that's the reality of the situation. But anyway, it's fun to dream. I've done it myself. Somewhat along the same lines here, actually. Steam Shovel Press. This is number 12. The quote at the head of the magazine says, "How far can you open your mind before your brains fall out? This is a challenge most of the readers of this magazine have accepted long ago." And I like it. It's definitely a fun magazine. And I would call it a magazine rather than a zine, even though there's a lot of ex-zinesters showing up in it. I mean, Len Bracken has a review in here, for God's sake, and Jim Keith is all over the place. So these are names from the world of zines who have crossed over into essentially conspiracy theory. That's what Steam Shovel Press is basically involved in. But the difference is, instead of being all this sort of right-wing kookology with the John Birch and the CFR and everything, this is more like coming from a left point of view. It's like left conspiracy theory. So we have articles on the CIA and LSD. We've got a fascinating, newly declassified Wilhelm Reich document of an FBI agent going to interview Reich. It's actually hilarious. I haven't laughed so hard over any supposedly serious article in a magazine for a long time.
Are you sure that it's not the...
No, it's real.
Yes?
It's real. I recognize, because I actually have read a bunch of Reich's late stuff from his crazy period. And I mean, he was still brilliant, but he was definitely off the wall. And you can just see that this poor FBI agent just was completely blown away. I mean, Reich just shouted him out of the world, you know. It's like, how dare you, you know, you stupid punk, kind of thing. And he interviewed him at Organon. And so, you know, there's all this stuff about flying. It's from the flying saucer period, the whole thing. And it's very, very funny. Then there's a very interesting article on the Gulf War biowarfare syndrome, the diseases that have cropped up, mysterious, including some sexually transmittable diseases.
Oh my goodness!
That have cropped up since the Gulf War and the.
There was just a big veterans meet about that out in where was it? Like
I don't
New
know,
Mexico
but
or Arizona.
I think it's
referred
like to here. There's all kinds of people who are sick. Their children are sick. Their wives are sick, and these are the people who.
And the Pentagon says it's all psychosomatic.
Were forced to have these injections.
Yes.
I've been hearing about this ever since 91.
No, this is not conspiracy theory. This is all quite real. I mean, you can get conspiracy, you can get conspiratorial about it, I guess, but it is documented.
Some paranoids have real enemies.
It is documented. You know, all of the Ralph Nader's people and so on were on the case, and they launched litigation to try to stop it. No, it's quite documented.
Yeah, but the government isn't admitting it. Well, they have actually. A few people have apparently inadvertently blurted out a few things, which this article covers. So it's a good piece. Then there's a Robert Anton Wilson interview, always fun. A bunch of UFO stuff, not so interesting, maybe, unless you're extremely involved in what's it called, Roswell controversy.
Yes. That was a weather balloon.
Yeah, we
Roswell.
got something about Bob Dylan, something about the political murders in Mexico, good reviews of conspiracy books. All in all, a very entertaining read for $4, man. I have to tell you, I don't often I read almost every word in here because each article was a chuckle, except for the UFO stuff, which is not my personal thing. But I'm sure that it's very interesting for people who like that.
Well, I mean, the whole obsession with Area 51.
That's in here too.
Sure. I mean, there really is quite nefarious stuff going on at Area 51. Whether or not space aliens are involved, and I'm inclined to think not.
I think a lot of people don't even believe that anymore. I think they all this is an interview. Actually, there's an interview in here with local residents who are activated, who are activists now.
Good.
And they're not talking about UFOs.
Good. I mean, there's enough to talk about without talking about UFOs, is my point, at Area 51. The Air Force is doing very, very nefarious stuff.
Very strange stuff indeed. Yeah. Anyhow,
incidentally, the August issue of High Times magazine is going to be looking at the whole issue of UFOs in Area 51.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I have something that should interest you from that point of view coming up here in a minute. Steam Shovel Press, Box 23715, St. Louis, Missouri. That's 2 words, St. Louis. MO 63121. That's Steam Shovel Press, Box 23715, St. Louis, Missouri 63121. Although I have to tell you, I did find it at Tower Books. And it does cost $4. Well,
there's also a sort of a
right-wing
equivalent of that called Paranoia.
Well, there's a whole bunch of new. A friend of mine told me there's at least 4 new hippo conspiracy.
Yeah, the whole conspiracy milieu is just exploding right now.
Yeah.
Yes, I certainly do know.
The Revolutionary Toker.
The Revolutionary
official
Toker.
voice of the Green Panthers.
Yes,
what a weird paper, man.
Yes.
I don't know. I'm going to ask your opinion of it in a minute. Let me just describe it.
I know those guys.
There's a picture of a cat smoking a joint, and there's an article here, which is in fact even weirder than the New Country stuff, about this guy with long hair and beads here who's predicting how America's going to break up into different regions and what that's going to mean for the legalization of pot.
Yeah, is that our friend Terry Mitchell?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. You see, I told you Bill was an expert in this. And then, actually, well, it goes on. It gets weirder and weirder, and then it begins to cover the militia movement, which is very interesting to me, and I wish to know more about it, and I'm actually probably going to send away for some of this material. But still, that's a kind of strange event, is to see the, I guess, what would you call the lunatic fringe of the decriminalization movement?
Legalization movement.
Or legalization
They don't want to hear
movement.
about decrim.
Right, okay. Lunatic fringe of the
marijuana
movement getting in bed together with the militias.
Precisely. I have spoken...
That's a curious one.
I've spoken to Terry about this. And
is he the editor of this thing?
Yeah, he's sort of like the. It's basically Terry and Lowy. They're the 2 people who run the Green Panthers. And I've spoken to Terry about this. We've had a frank exchange of views on it. I obviously am far more wary and skeptical about the militia movement.
Well, I did say, I read an article in Covert Action, about the militia movement. Now, everything I read in Covert Action, I do tend to take with a grain of salt, because it seems to me that they absolutely will not hear 2 sides to any story, that magazine. And so I read what they had to say about militias. According to the new militia movement, according to them, it's all like John Birchers and worse. People to the right of the John Birch Society.
Well,
and I'm not so sure that's true. Now, I literally mean that I'm not sure. I'm not disagreeing. Yeah. I'm just not sure, because I've heard other stuff. This guy here, Dwayne House, who's writing of the call to arms, join the militia, ends up quoting Fidel Castro and Che Guevara. What does that mean? What does that mean? What does it mean? Maybe it doesn't mean anything.
It's very strange.
I don't know what it means. But it's not your ordinary, maybe it's third wave, kind of, Hitler and Mao stuff going on. Or is it, what is it? Whence does this phenomenon arise? I believe.
Well, I don't know. All I know
we
is
have to
that
look into it.
We do have to look into it because it's very big. It's rapidly growing. It's a genuine, grassroots populist upsurge. There's no doubt about that.
I think it has some real revolutionary potential. Maybe
it's all coordinated over the internet. It's very decentralized.
Yeah, they got the anarchist form of organization, from what I can make out.
To the extent to which they've glommed around a particular leader, it's Bo Greitz.
And this woman, Linda something.
Right, in Indianapolis. Yeah. And Bo Greitz seems to be the charismatic personality out in the West.
I wouldn't trust him any farther than I could throw him.
No, absolutely not. But
it doesn't mean that everybody involved in the movement is, in his pocket.
Well, no, I don't think everybody involved in the movement is in his pocket, but it's tricky.
It's very tricky. I'm going to send away for some of this
tricky
stuff. We'll have a look at it.
I recently heard a tape. The fellow's name escapes me at the moment, but I encourage you to send away for this stuff and take a look at it. I recently heard a tape. The fellow's name escapes me at the moment, but he's a former Phoenix, Arizona cop who started a newsletter on the force, for his fellow officers about gun rights stuff, and was kicked off of the force on account of this, and now is like a major luminary in this militia movement, and he goes on speaking tours around the country and so on. And I heard a tape of one of his lectures. I received it at work at High Times, and gave it a listen. And he starts out sounding really good. He talks about the war on drugs and the creeping police state behind the crime bill, which was passed last year, which of course is now a new one is coming up the pike, which is even more draconian thanks to Newt Gingrich. Talks about the erosion of the Bill of Rights, and he talks about the Federal Emergency Management Agency and the martial law plan, and
then it starts to get weird, right?
And it starts to get
weird. They
weird.
sort of UN troops being massed on the borders.
Exactly
and all this
right.
stuff.
Exactly right.
I don't know.
It's going to be African peacekeeping troops being sent in by the UN to take hard working white folks' guns away, and they're going to be arming the black and Latino gangs from the inner cities and L.A. to take your guns away.
Did he use those terms precisely?
Yes.
He'd use racial terms?
Yes.
Yeah, well, obviously there's a bunch of problems here, but I don't know. Because it's not centralized, it's conceivable that...
And anti-gay stuff, too.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. It's probably impossible to... It's just, I don't even know if I should say something like this on the air. I'd like to see something like this develop from the left, instead of from the right.
You shouldn't say something like this on the air.
Okay, I'll stop talking now.
Especially since it's a total pipe dream, man. It's unfortunately, it's 1995.
Yeah, but
Well, look, I mean,
that's what they said to the Vietnamese too. How can you fight? How can you fight America? They've got all the big weapons, All right, I don't want to make any.
Another thing that I heard is that when new recruits arrive at boot camp these days, Chris Flash actually said that he received a copy of this questionnaire. Somebody sent it to him, which
militia questionnaire.
Yeah, it's like would you be willing to fight overseas under United Nations command? Questions like that. All questions clearly relating to the very issues which this militia movement is concerned with. Yeah. So, there's no doubt that the feds are watching this whole movement very carefully. And unfortunately, a lot of, so-called, peace, nonviolence activists who are basically coming from the left don't even know that this movement exists.
I know. And if they do, they just automatically knee-jerk. They have their own reactionary aspects about them, that they have a knee-jerk reaction to any kind of populism that has, that uses a certain kind of rhetoric. Now, I'm not saying I'm going to end up supporting the militia. All I'm saying is that I don't think, even if there was something positive about it, I don't think it would get a fair shake in the leftist press.
Well, except that the leftist press itself is sort of permutating in some very strange ways these days.
Everything's getting weirder and weirder.
Everything's getting weirder and weirder. I would just say that this militia movement is definitely to be watched and grappled with.
Yes.
Let's just leave it at that.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to do some more research. I'll look into it more. Meanwhile, if you want to get in touch with Revolutionary Toker,
the Green Panthers.
They are Panthers Press, Box 31231, Cincinnati, Ohio. That's O-H. Well, maybe I'll better spell Cincinnati for you. I know I would like it if you spelled it for me. Cincinnati. That's Cincinnati, Ohio. OH 45231. Panthers Press, Box 31231, Cincinnati, OH 45231. And I don't know how much it costs. Probably not much. It's just a 8-page tabloid format. So send him a couple bucks. I don't see the price here, but I'm sure you can get something out of him for a couple of bucks.